So why don't we start with you, Professor Maris, while we're waiting for everyone else, what I'd like to do, there's Professor Wells. Hello, Professor Wells.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it on behalf of the admissions team. Professor Maris, let's start with you. And what I'd like to do is have each professor introduce themselves, a little bit about your background and your specialization so the students will know all about our speakers today. So I'll start with you, Professor Maris.
Okay, so I'm Professor Maris, and I went to law school late in life. So this is my third career. And I went to law school because I wanted to be a stronger advocate for children. And I was told by a lot of people that having the JD would help. Realized we still put children last. But I also had taught for a long time before I went to law school. And so I was torn between both litigating, which I enjoy, and also teaching, which I also enjoy. So I took the path of first teaching in clinical education at the law school and strengthening our clinical program. So I got a chance to both litigate and also teach. And now I run our Center for Children Law and Policy and teach juvenile justice, children in the law, professionalism, and a variety of skills courses. And we started 6 years ago now, a street law class where our students go into the high schools and teach high school students about the law, with the hope that they both become better citizens and get an interest in the law, and will diversify the legal field. We are starting this summer doing it also at the Juvenile Detention Center, and in the fall we will be in all of Harris County juvenile probation facilities. So we've expanded it quite a bit and really looking forward to the next couple of years to see what else we can do.
Great. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions today from our students. I will go right along as I'm seeing everyone in the panel. Professor Fagundes, why don't you start and tell us about you, and we'll go from there.
Hey all, my name is Dave Fagundes. I suppose the simplest way to put it is that I'm interested and always have been in the idea of ownership, how law intersects with and regulates it. So in terms of my writing, what that means is that I've written about things like the moral intuitions that accompany our ownership. I'm also interested in looking at how we often use informal norms rather than formal law to regulate the things that we own and feel a sense of possession over. And then I wrote a series of papers also about recent work in social psychology suggesting that ownership has sort of some interesting and counterintuitive relationships with our subjective well-being, or more informally, our happiness. So in terms of teaching, what that translates into is that I teach courses about property, both physical and intellectual property. That includes the first year course in property, trusts and estates, mortgages, and copyright.
Great, thank you very much. Professor Wells, thank you for joining us, and we'll pass it on to you. And what we're doing is we're having each professor that's on our panel series today tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your specialization.
Sure. My name is Brett Wells. I'm been with the faculty for about 10 years, and I teach and write in the tax area. So international tax and corporate tax are my main areas of primary scholarship. And I teach in those areas and also teach the federal income tax course here at the law school. And I teach that with a view of what every JD student should know about how tax impacts their practice area. I also teach in the oil and gas area and write in that area of scholarship as well. Before coming to the law faculty, I spent 20 years in various industry roles in the oil and gas area, and with a tax focus for my practice.
Great, thank you so much. Professor Lawrence, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We'd love to hear about you and your background, and if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jim Lawrence. I'm the Executive Director of the Blakely Advocacy Institute, and I've been at the law school since 1994 in the advocacy program. I'm sort of like Professor Maris in the sense that law is my third career. And the other two had nothing to do with the law, so I won't go into those. But But I work in the advocacy program, and my responsibility is two things. One, to make sure that we offer the complete dispute resolution continuum of classes to our students about advocacy. So everything from interviewing clients all the way through appeals, we offer classes in those subjects. And then I'm also responsible for overseeing, helping coach, helping teach all of our interscholastic competition teams in mock trial, moot court, and ADR.
Great, thank you. And I see we have Professor Chandler. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'd love to have you introduce yourself. Oh, I think you're on.
Got it.
There you go.
Okay. So, hi, I'm Professor Chandler, and I have diverse interests. I teach first-year students constitutional law and sometimes contracts law, both of which are great interests of mine. I work in insurance law and health law is a related topic. I've done a lot of work on the Affordable Care Act, used to blog on it for quite some time. I teach courses in a course called Analytic Methods for Lawyers, which is about statistics and machine learning and networks and computational linguistics as they apply to law. Currently working on a something paper, book, I don't know what it is, on classification and the costs of equality through machine learning algorithms. So I've got a lot of interest. I've been at law school for 30 years. I've seen it grow tremendously in the quality of its faculty and the quality of its students and programs. And so that's me. And here you can see like I'm a normal person. Someplace my dog is there and out here in the woods. All right.
That is great. Well, thank you so much. So what I plan to do is we have a number of questions that have been submitted already to us. What I'll do is I'll start with just a few questions and I'll leave it up to you folks, whoever wants to chime in. We usually have this as a very informal question and answer session for our students. If you want to chat a question, or if you want to use the wave function as well, I'll be moderating that as well. One of the questions, or one of the overall topics that was front in mind of a lot of our admitted students is preparation. What strategies or advice would you have for our incoming 1Ls, and particularly in this time, in this time period that we're in, and generally for a new law student? So I'll let you experts take it from here. Let's start. I'll pick. How about Professor Wells? If you would like to chime in and tell us what you would recommend for some advice for new students.
You know, the first thing I would say is come, you know, with an eager desire to learn and to really attack your courses with the type of energy that, you know, that you can muster for them. Second thing is that probably most of you on this call are have been smart enough, intelligent enough, good enough to be able to fall behind on your courses and make it up at the end before finals. That's a terrible strategy for law school. Best strategy for you in law school is to read before the lecture, listen to the lecture in light of your reading, then think about how you came to wrong answers or different answers than the way the professor did, and rewrite your notes and reread your readings. That sounds like double effort, but as you're going along, if you're able to guess what you think the right answers are as you're reading through the course materials, and then recalibrate as you're going through that class, I think that is a very helpful strategy. You'll learn when you come here about how to diagram a case, how to think about the different elements of a case, and all the rest. But I think one of the most important things is do not use the style of thinking that I can just wing it at the end as an effective strategy. Part of the training will be your interaction in the class based upon you already being prepared, and then thinking about how your thinking needed to evolve to be exactly where the professor was.
And what I would add to that is, given the times that we're in right now, you want to come to law school healthy. Whether you're taking a class online, whether you're taking the class in person, you want to make sure that you're healthy, because if you're sick, it's going to be hard to keep up, as Professor Wells was saying. So I would make sure that I spent quality time with family and close friends that you've been around, that you know are okay. But I would also make sure that I stayed safe and healthy.
Yeah, let me add a couple of things. First, I want to echo what Professor Maris just said. You've got to keep healthy. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of time to get sick. And so you can, pick your internet guru and take vitamin D or NAC or whatever helps you, but be smart and be careful because, 3 weeks battling with COVID, even when you recover, is not going to be a fun time. In terms of substance, there's actually a pretty good YouTube channel by some guy, Legal Eagle, who I actually think has pretty good advice about the first year of law school. And so you might want to look at that. The other thing is almost all the first year courses will have tutors. And so those tutors generally will have done very well in that professor's class, and they will probably know better than we do what works. So,
I think we might have lost Professor Chandler there. I think he's probably going to join us shortly, but we lost his connection. Professor Fagundes or Professor Lawrence, whatever.
Yeah, here's how I thought about it. When I was in college, I thought of it like school. When I went to law school, I treated it like a job. So I would actively schedule my days from 8:30 odd to 5:30 odd in the evening. And I think that's effective for a couple reasons. One, it's a helpful transition to a very challenging professional milieu. I think that, working at a law firm or working at any law job is challenging, and getting on that schedule early is helpful. But also, and several of my colleagues have already said this, the level of care and attention you need to take with respect to reading is a quantum leap beyond what you need in college. I mean, honestly, I think in college you can sort of read the readings, catch up, as Brett said, last minute, and maybe do pretty well if you're smart, which you guys are. I don't think that's possible in law school. So if you're not sort of carefully parsing out your study time, and thinking of it in forward-looking terms, I think that's a concern. And just put it in a more positive light, all the students I have who are sort of conspicuously successful have that kind of approach. So it works, sort of consistently in my observation anyway.
That's very good advice. We typically, when we're talking and doing our online sessions, preparing students for law school from an admission standpoint, we do really hone in on that, the importance of attending class, being present. It's very different than your undergrad. Professor Chandler, I think we lost you there for a little while.
Yes, and it goes to my next piece of advice, which is get a good internet connection. Because what just happened to me can happen to you, and it's not very much fun in the middle of your class, and probably you will be using the internet, I would imagine, a fair amount this fall, even when many of your classes may be held in some version of in-person. But paying a little bit for good internet, I think, is a very good investment at these times.
Okay, thank you. Professor Lawrence, would you like to jump in?
I don't really have much to add except to piggyback a little bit on the be healthy, be well comment. When you start law school, you are starting a 3-year marathon. And so not only would I encourage you to come to law school healthy, but come to law school rested to the extent you can, get your mind clear. And once you start law school, you're going to need all the rest you can get before you start. So that would be my only addition.
Great, thank you. We've gotten a lot of questions from our students about what will this fall look like, and I've told most of the students that we don't quite know that yet, and as soon as we do, they will be first to be told. With that, we've had a lot of questions from students wanting to know about what your experience was like virtual learning, and did you have any innovative approaches while going virtual last semester? And are there any strategies that you can recommend to students to better prepare in the event that there are some virtual classes, or a portion of that? I know that's a long question, but.
Well, I think one thing that the law school is doing very well right now is, yes, every university gave some time for faculty members to get ready before we went online, but that wasn't really a lot of time or a lot of training. And what the law school has done now is continued that training. And so for the whole summer, we've been having workshops and sessions about using Zoom or Team to make our classes better. And so I think that is a really good step by the law school. I probably had a couple of advantages in the sense that I had done a lot of Zoom meetings and trainings before we went online. So it made it a little bit easier for me. And my daughter, who also teaches at a university, had done a lot of online classes for a variety of different reasons, taught a lot of online classes. So she shared some tips with me too. I use the breakout rooms a lot because a lot of the classes that I teach is a lot of hands-on types of things. And so it was easier to put students into breakout groups so they could work on their hearing, preparation for their hearing that we would then do in a larger group. And everybody would be able to then see how they were prepared. The other thing that was good about that in particular is a lot of courts have gone to Zoom hearings. And you have to be ready and prepared to do that. And you may have to be ready and prepared to do that when you get out of law school. We don't know what's going to happen with a lot of things in the future. And in rural areas for juvenile hearings, a lot of them are video anyway and have been for a long time. So it was a good thing for my students to get used to that. We're now preparing with street law in the fall, not just how we're going to teach our students, but we're also teaching them how to teach on Zoom. So hopefully that will also help my teaching too.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to contribute or join in on that?
So I just finished one of the panels Ellen was describing earlier today, talking about my experience in Zoom teaching, you know, as part of our ongoing attempts to perfect it. But my overall impression is it's fine, right? It's perhaps not the optimal way to deliver education, but we're not in an optimal world given the pandemic. And I think I've been impressed at how many interesting innovations my colleagues have come up with and how thoughtful and hardworking they've been to develop these approaches. And, you know, I've taught 2 classes so far on Zoom. Property, the second half of last semester had 60 some students. I taught a summer mini course of Trust and Wills, which had 45 students. And they both went according to, and this is, you know, listening to students' reaction to them, you know, very well. I was able to deliver information, sustain a discussion. The finals that I read reflected that the students assimilated the information very well. So, you know, it may not be the you know, best possible outcome, but I do think that it's a perfectly good substitute given challenging circumstances. And I don't think there's a significant shortfall in the quality of education, especially given the significant creativity and efforts and devotion that our faculty's had to delivering excellent education in the online setting.
Great, thank you. So we can, if is there any other professors that would like to chime in at all, or I can move on to another question? So what we have had a few questions, specific questions on your teaching style. So students have asked us, do you practice the Socratic method, cold calling? How can students prepare? If you do, so I'd love for each of you to describe your teaching style. And also along with that, how do students stand out in terms of, how do they stand out to you in terms of being a successful student? So I'll let one of you jump right in.
Okay, I'll go first. I use a variety of different teaching techniques depending on the course and the area that is being covered. I like to use the Socratic method, what I call a friendly or gentle Socratic method, where I'm not attempting to isolate a student, but try to get a conversation and to get the class to move in understanding of an area through a conversation. And so the students that have come that are well prepared, that are able to engage in a conversation and speak up about what they know or don't know is very helpful in having a conversation. It's a conversation among a larger group, but I think that helps in being able to see where students are at and where we need to get to in our evolution of thinking. And I use that conversation to inform myself about where we can speed up in the class conversation and where we need to slow down. Other parts of the material, you know, I may well lecture more often than not, but it depends upon, in my mind, about whether the students would be able to synthesize just hearing the lecture without a give and take. But let me say this. Socratic method is not something to be scared about. When you're at a law firm or somewhere else, your partner that you're going to be working for wants to know what you don't know, and what you're struggling with, and where the project is in terms of your research. And that type of an ability to talk about what you know, don't know, and what you're evolving in your thinking about is a helpful thing to be able to do in the course of your professional career. So I think the Socratic method is a wonderful resource. I think the idea that it's used to intimidate or belittle is not what I think this faculty attempts to achieve with that method when they use it. What the intent is to come alongside and have a conversation about how do we think about a particular area.
Thank you, Professor. I'll let Professor Maris, I'll let you jump in.
Okay, well, I don't teach any first year courses, so this isn't going to really help you for your first year in that sense. I do a lot of discussion, and I do not necessarily teach everything from the casebook. So I have you read things, but I expect you to know it and to intertwine it into the discussion and the questions that I'm asking, but I won't go over it specifically case by case. I do that in the beginning with Supreme Court cases in my juvenile law class, but in other classes, I actually don't do that very much. You're going to take that information. You should have digested that, especially since you're going to be in your second or third year by the time you're taking one of my courses. I do group work. I do individual group discussions, the whole class. I do some writing assignments in each class, and I do a lot of, in my practice related courses, a lot of hearing type things. So you get the actual practice without being in the courtroom or with a client where you're going to be very nervous. Although I do urge you to take your clinical programs also to get that live experience with actual clients and in the courtroom. So you need a combination of both. I guess that kind of sums it up.
Thank you.
So, can I chime in?
Absolutely.
So I teach two first-year classes, con law and contracts, and I teach them both quite differently. In contracts, it's very interactive. It's a problem-based course in which you're given a packet of materials. It might be cases, it'll be some statutes, and then you're given a synthetic problem that hopefully is addressed by those materials, and we'll work through in kind of a Socratic way how those problems, the client's problem or the issue might be resolved. And so that is a pretty interactive approach. My con law class, I actually do a fair amount of lecturing. I have very elaborate PowerPoints. I spend a lot of time on history because I think it's very important to understand the historical context. In constitutional law, yes, I call on people. If I'm in person, I will call on people cold. In Zoom, I find that doesn't work well, and I'll have panels where the students are prepared and I'm prepared for who to call on, and we'll have sidebar chat, which I try to respond to. And so it really depends on, for me, it depends on the material I'm covering. In con law, one of the reasons I lecture is there's just a tremendous amount of material to be covered, and I find that I can do contracts at a slightly more leisurely pace.
Great, thank you. Property, Professor Fagundes, you want to? That
Hey,
would
sorry, I'm having some weird thing with my magic mouse, so it's harder for me to unmute than it would normally seem. So those are all good points. I don't differ too much in methodology. So let me speak more generally. I think that, you know, one of the best things about law school classes is that they are interactive. You know, after I went to law school, I got bored just listening to somebody talk at me for 40 minutes, right? I was like, hey, when do I get to be a part of this discussion and participate? And the fact that our classes invite discussion and are collaborative, to me, makes them much more dynamic and interesting than the sort of traditional somebody reading prepare a script that you think. So I think it's something to be really excited about. And I love teaching my classes because it has this dialogic component. And that's what I call it. I call my classes dialogic, which is to say that I want to engage in a dialogue with students. Socratic is a little bit of a misnomer. The strict Socratic method first has like a particular and kind of negative association in law school with the kind of, you know, intimidating Kingsfield method, which is outdated. The true Socratic method also left students or the interlocutor with no answers. And that seems silly to me. I try to give students concrete takeaways. I think it's a misnomer to say that there are no right answers in law. There's plenty of them. That's why we do multiple choice tests or have statutes. The thing I would keep in mind is that professors want you to participate and appreciate it when you're prepared and engaged, right? It is something that every professor likes. You know, you want to see the hands up. And also when you make a comment, we want you to succeed, right? I always try to find the insight or the good angle of every student comment and build on that, which is why I think of it as a collaboration, right? We are engaging in a discussion with you to enhance everyone's understanding of the material. And the final thing I would say is, look, we have experience with speaking on a challenging topic in front of 70 smart people. I did not when I went to law school, and I did find it nerve-wracking at first, but here's what I would suggest. I made myself do it, right? I made myself raise my hand and participate in class, even though I felt ill at ease doing it. And after a while, it got easier. And then after a while after that, it got fun. So yes, there's going to be discomfort, but you know, like all things that are that are worth doing, they might be difficult at first, but lean into it. And I think that you will find it one of the most rewarding parts of your law school experience.
Great, thank you so much. These are such good points. I hope our students are enjoying. I'd like to ask Professor Lawrence about participating in moot court, mock trial competitions for our new students coming in. And then for our students, I'd like you to start thinking of some questions you're able to come off of audio afterwards. So audio and video, and ask questions directly. So Professor Lawrence, I'd love for you to kind of explain to the students a little bit about that important part of law school.
Sure. So we have at the law school an alternative dispute resolution team, a moot court team, and a mock trial team. And all of those three put together pretty much constitutes all the advocacy skills that you'll use as a lawyer. So it's everything from negotiation to client counseling to making an appeal. That's the moot court aspect. Mock trial is exactly what you might expect. We don't have 1L team members. So your 1L is devoted toward your studies. We will have tryouts at the end of the spring semester for all three teams. And I will say that students who participate in these competitions find it incredibly rewarding. It's great networking. We've had students get jobs from being in competitions and on competition teams. So I think it's an incredible opportunity. And there's plenty of opportunity for you to find out about these teams throughout your 1L year.
Great, thank you. So let's have the students ask questions if they would like to come off of audio and or video, at least audio. I don't know if you know how to use the wave function. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So students, this is your unique opportunity to ask a question directly of our professor panel. So don't be shy. Who would like to jump in and ask a question? I know there's a few because I get a lot of them. Okay, I don't see anyone. Okay, while we're waiting for students to jump in with questions. Okay, Daria, why don't you come off of mute and ask your question?
Hi. So I had a question. I heard that exams are different from like undergrad in law school. How
I
they?
don't, you might have to speak a little bit louder. I don't know if anyone else can hear.
I heard that exams in law school are different from the undergraduate degree, undergraduate classes. How they're different, and how do we prepare for them?
Good question. Anyone?
The first thing I guess I would say is professors have very different exam styles. And so I don't think there's one good one size fits all answer. I would say many of them tend to be applied. That is, a traditional law school exam will be you are given some fact pattern. Congress passes some bill regulating the interstate transportation of salamanders, and someone illegally transports salamanders. And so you're going to be asked to discuss the issues there. There's probably less reliance on multiple choice than in some undergraduate disciplines, but that again may depend on the professor as well as your undergraduate discipline. I would say, and other professors can correct me, but I think it's unusual, not unheard of, but unusual to have sort of a pure think piece essay, like that might be part of the exam, but I don't think it would be as it might be in an English class or something like that, where there might be something a little more abstract. I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's fair to say that at least a traditional law school exam is problem focused, and therefore you want to practice taking law school exams. Is one thing I would tell you to do. Is there's an art to it, and being able to write a coherent exam that's organized, often in a fairly short period of time with complex material, is a skill, and it's one that's probably, like many skills, best learned through practice.
Great.
And I would say part of it depends on what course it is. So in professional responsibility, I tend to do just what Professor Chandler was talking about. There'll be a problem-based question, and based on the rules of professional responsibility, you would have to discuss whether that person is going to face any possible consequences from their actions as a lawyer. In juvenile law, I do two parts usually. I do a practice part, and it's usually quite complicated in the sense that you take on different roles at different parts of the question, but it's all based on one very long fact pattern. So you might be the prosecutor for one part of the answer, you might be a defense attorney for another part, and you might be the judge in one part. So you have to look at it through different eyes during that time. But I also do a policy question, because part of what I try to do in juvenile law is to get you to think about how we can change the system and make it better for young people, so that we don't have problems of recidivism, we don't have disproportionate minority representation within the juvenile justice system. How are we going to make it better? Because you're our future leaders, and you're going to be the ones who are going to change these things. So I always have a policy question with it that does take a lot more pulling together and thinking in the abstract about juvenile law and juvenile justice.
Great. Thank you.
So what I would say on this question is that one of the bigger differences, I think, between an undergrad and a law school exam is in a law school exam, you'll be given a story, much like a client will come. They know they have a problem, but they don't know what their problem is, or they may not know all of their problems. And the challenge for you is that you're not getting a question that says, well, what's the answer to this issue? You're being given a fact pattern, and you need to identify the issue, what's the relevant law that applies to that issue, analyze it and come to a conclusion, and then what is the next issue? So that the law school exam will be several nested issues. And one of the skills, I think one of the most important skills of a lawyer, is identifying the issues that need to be resolved. If you're a lawyer and you know there's an issue, I'm not worried about you. You're conscientious enough and smart enough, you'll find the answer. The lawyer I'm worried about is the one that can't see the issues. And so a law school exam will often give you a story and will not telegraph to you, here are the 7 issues that need to be resolved. It will give you the story, and it's incumbent on the lawyer to take from what the client says or from what the fact pattern says to unpack what is the relevant law, the issues, what's the rule of law that applies to those issues, how do you apply that law to those facts, and what is your conclusion, and here's the next issue. And that is what I think is different. Many undergraduate exams will typically telegraph to you, I want you to explain this question. Well, if you already know the question to be asked, you're not going to have trouble as a lawyer. It's the problem is, do you see the issues that need to be resolved? And so I think that is a meaningful difference in how law school exams are put together, and they're modeled after your real practice. In the real world, clients come to you with a host of issues, most of which they may not know.
Great point. Very good point. Anyone else want to chime in on this question? Yeah. Okay, great. I see Nicole. Welcome, Nicole. I'll let you come off of audio.
Yes,
Nicole,
hi.
One of our part-time evening students, and we're thrilled to have her. So why don't you jump right in?
Thank you. Yes, Professor Lawrence, you said that there's tryouts at the end of a 1L year. Can you describe a little bit of how those tryouts are? Like what happens during those tryouts? Who's selected for that?
Certainly. The tryouts will be a little different for each team. So for moot court, you'll give an appellate argument. For mock trial, you might give an opening statement and a cross-examination. For ADR, you might do 2 rounds of negotiation. And you'll have the opportunity to get some instruction on how to prepare for the tryout, so you don't have to go in cold, never having done it. The tryouts did not happen this spring for obvious reasons, and so we will have tryouts right before school starts for all 3 teams. And we'll be sending out emails to all the students about when that happens, when the information sessions are going to be, and all the relevant information you need for the teams.
Are we able to attend those tryouts to see them, just to see how they go, or are they private tryouts?
They're private tryouts, so it would be 1 student in front of the coaches or the director of the program, and but the preparation sessions would be the opportunity for you to sort of see what a tryout's going to be like.
Great. Thank you. Autumn, I believe you have a question, so feel free to come off of audio mute and join us.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my question. So my question, actually, I appropriated it from the Facebook post, but I was really compelled by seeing what the answers would be, and I didn't hear the question come up. Based on what's been happening with the situation in the news with the recent protests, I guess I'm interested in the professors. How has it informed your practice or your understanding of how you'll maybe teach while moving forward? For context, I'm a teacher in Houston's 5th Ward, and I've been spending a lot of time with students, writing letters to councilwomen and councilmen, and so I'm just really interested to see what that will look like on the law side as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Autumn.
I'm going to jump in really quickly because you said 5th Ward, and I've got a lot for you to do in the future. So one of the reasons I am so excited about us going into the Harris County Juvenile Justice programs is because it does give us the opportunity to reach out to young people who really do need some guidance and some help, and finding some ways that they can both deal with the system the way that it is and how they can change the system. And that's a lot of what street law is about. The center also works with an agency in 5th Ward, CUT, where we're helping them get kids before they get into the system. So they're getting diverted from the juvenile justice system. They may have had some problems, but they're not getting charged. They're getting into this program with community support and also legal support. So it's not changing the way that I teach so much, or the subject matters that I teach, because these are things that I was looking at way before the protests and the demonstrations. But when I teach juvenile law, for example, we're always talking about race and children and how that's impacted in the system. We talk about the educational system and race and how that impacts children coming through the system. We talk about abuse and neglect and race and how that impacts children coming through the system, because the majority of children, unfortunately, who are coming through the system are brown and Black children. And it's not because they get into trouble more, but it's because of the way our system is. So I'm always pushing students to be looking at answers in that area. So that's my feeling with that.
Thank you, Professor Maris.
But Autumn, I want to look for you after your first year, please.
We will definitely
Yes,
connect.
ma'am. I will send you an email.
Definitely. And come by and see, well, come by and email me and come see me via Zoom during your first year, if that's the way that we're going. But definitely want to talk more.
I guess I'll chime in with two things I can foresee. And one difficulty in answering this question is I don't think we're done yet. And so my class, for example, is until spring. And so we will have to see what evolves between now and then. But certainly in my constitutional law class, we do cover topics of executive immunity. That is the extent to which people who think or arguably think that they are fulfilling the law may have you may have difficulty suing them, even if what they did was wrongful. And we may want to add some material to that to extend it to state law actors and talk about the effects of qualified immunity on, for example, police behavior. Certainly, I teach a seminar, a writing seminar. It's an advanced constitutional law seminar called Shameful or Ignored Supreme Court Cases. And certainly, a good component of that course is spent on issues of race, of Native Americans, of immigration, of Asian Americans, as well as debt slavery, slavery itself, all sorts of good stuff. I have not spent a good deal of time, I will confess, on these issues of immunity or other legal factors that have tended to make it more difficult to force police officers to comply with the law and engage in reasonable behavior. And it does strike me that that's probably been an omission on my part, and one that will be corrected.
Thank you. Professor Wells, I think you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, my areas, tax and oil and gas, do not directly impact, are not directly impacted by some of the recent events. But I do want to say, I think all of our emotions are raw, and there's a great hurt right now in terms of what's happening in the larger society. One of the things that I think is wonderful about our law school is that our faculty is genuinely interested in teaching and understanding our students and knowing that life happens and helping students get through this experience in a successful way. One of the things that I much admire about my colleagues on the faculty is that they are very dedicated teachers. And if you come to this school, I think you're going to be really impressed with how much we care about the community and the inclusiveness of our community, and meeting you where you're at and helping you along. This is not a solo experience. Law school can be isolating, but your professors want to come alongside you, and your classmates. You'll find a rich community here, I think, if you come to this school.
Could I just double up here and chime in and piggyback on what Professor Wells said? For what it's worth, I've chaired our promotion and tenure committee for the past 6 or 7 years, determining on who gets promoted, who gets tenured. And I can assure you 100% that teaching is an important part of that. Respect for students is a very important part of that. In fact, I don't think I'd be speaking out of school to say one faculty member who perhaps did not treat students in an optimal fashion is one of the faculty members who did not succeed here. and that we are going have an absolute commitment, I would say, to teaching excellence. And part of teaching excellence is treating students with respect, regardless of political views, race, class, whatever, and making sure that they feel honored to be in our classroom and are respected by, as well as by their faculty.
Thank you. That was great. Oh, we got you back. Any other points on this? Mitchell, I believe you had a question. If you'd like to come off of mute and video, we'd be happy to have you join us. And then I think we have time for one last question after Mitchell.
Yes, so I'd like to thank everyone for being here and taking these questions. Mine is, how can you build a genuine relationship with professors aside from coming to class prepared, asking questions, and utilizing tutors? And are there lots of opportunities to meet one-on-one outside of class?
Good question.
I think that one of the good things about U of H is that the professors don't just all have office hours, but they really do have very often an open door policy where students do drop in frequently to talk to professors. When I've talked to students who are visiting from other law schools or transferring from another law school, one of the things that I always hear is about how much the faculty here at U of H do care about the students and are accessible to the students. So I think there's definitely time for that. It's a little harder if we end up being totally online, in the sense that it will be a Zoom appointment. But even then, you know, at least it's still a one-on-one conversation that you can have with the faculty member, or a group of you could come in and talk to a faculty member, because you might have some of the same questions and some of the same interests, and you might want to do that too. So I think there's lots of opportunities for that.
Let me just add, what Ellen said is exactly right. I don't know where your life story is and what your undergrad experience was or the rest, but professors here want students to come by and talk with them and to have a conversation. If a professor is not available, you can email that professor and ask for a call or ask for a virtual visit, or to visit during office hours or later. The point that I'm driving to is that, but many times the professors want you to reach out to them. They're not just going to affirmatively call you and say, hey, how are you doing right now? And so what I would say is that don't come with the expectation that professors will be bugged or put off if you come by. Come with the expectations that the professors genuinely want to have a conversation with you and want to meet with you at a time that's convenient for you. And you take ownership of your education. Go make those meetings. Go meet with the professors. You're not going to be putting us out or wasting our time. We're doing this because we love meeting with students. That's what we want to do. And so I think some people come with a preconceived bias that going to the professor at off times is an imposition in some sort. It's exactly the opposite. Now, I will say, I think there may be other schools that are not that way, but one of the admirable things about our faculty is that we have a large group of people who are genuinely interested in investing in the lives of students, because our society needs to be a lot better than it is right now. And you're the promise that that will be improved.
And I will add to that, there's two things that I think also helps that. One, we have a program where you get a faculty mentor in your first year, and we meet with you in small groups. And that will be continuing in your first year, just as it has for every other class. And I think that's a way you get to know another faculty member that you may not have for your classes, because I do mentor first years, but I don't teach first years. So I think that's another way that you get to know faculty and get to talk to them. And although I don't think we reach out and make those phone calls all the time, when an emergency happens, we do. So I know that when Harvey hit, I made sure all my students were okay and had reached out to them to check that they were all right and safe, and actually got one student and her children off the roof of their house. Because that's where they were stuck and she couldn't get anybody to get out there. And I happened to have a connection with emergency services and got somebody there to get them off. So we do check up on that kind of thing too. When the pandemic hit, I emailed all my students to make sure first that they were okay. And when I didn't hear from somebody, I checked with student services. Hey, have you heard from this student? Are they okay? I haven't heard from them. They didn't show up at class the first week. I just want to know that they're okay. And so like there is that kind of concern also in emergency situations. I think Professor Wells is right. We're not going to do that on a daily basis, but on an emergency situation, people are, this is a community, and I think we are there for each other.
If I might just jump in real quickly, Mitchell, the thing that I would encourage you to do is take advantage of our very approachable faculty. You don't have to set up a meeting to talk to faculty. It's rare that I see faculty walking to and from their office to class solo. It seems like they're always talking to a student. So take advantage of those informal times where you happen to be walking in the same direction as a professor. Take that opportunity to engage them, and I promise you they will engage back.
Thank you. Any other points?
I would just add, for what it's worth, in my con law class, the students actually created this thing called Podcast Club, where they listen to podcasts on constitutional law, get together and discuss it. And I try to attend almost every single session of that to be a resource to them, to get to know them better, because as I said, I do lecture a fair amount in con law. And I find that's a helpful way to get to know them. For what it's worth, I also, this past spring, I had Zoom hours almost every evening for students. I didn't have much to do, and I made myself available, and that's another way to get to know your faculty is through office hours, either real or virtual, as other people have said. And so I'll stop there.
Great, thank you. Nicole, I believe you have another question, so feel free to join us. I think Nicole had her hand up.
Me?
Yes.
I don't think so.
Maybe not. Okay, that was from before. So last call, if there's any other questions, I'm just going to give one more chance for folks to either chat a question or their name. Otherwise, I'd like to thank our professors for joining us today. I think this was very helpful. Professor Chandler, you have the best background, I have to say. So that looks lovely wherever you are. It looks very nice. Well, thank you, everyone. And for the students, I'll be reaching out to you as a follow-up. And professors, I really appreciate it. Hope everyone stays safe. If you have any questions, I'm going to chat my email down below here. Students, you know where to reach me. There you go, EDU. And we look forward to seeing you all and starting your law career as 1L. So thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Look forward to you joining the Cougar family.
Yay, go Cougs.